My latest book is The Art of Batting. It delves deep into how the best players ever made their runs. Get your copy today. Welcome to Wagon Wheel on the Good Areas Live Podcast Network. We've got a couple of podcasts today, actually. I think we've got another one straight after this as well. But for now, what we're going to do is answer your questions in cricket, because that's what this show does. It answers your questions in cricket. If you're watching live, the best way to ask a question is via a super chat on YouTube. But if you are a Patreon subscriber, you might have already done that. You might have already sent me a message beforehand. So go over to Good Areas podcast on Patreon, and you'll be able to find us there, like Rishi did. And he said, I've been thinking about the logic of the pink ball test matches. Australia has hosted 10 of them, while no other country has hosted more than 2. England has had just a single pink ball test, despite having evening-friendly crowds and a domestic schedule packed with night games. So why hasn't the ECB considered hosting more day-night test matches? The idea made sense globally for after-work crowds, but Australia barely changes attendance. Oh, okay. So there's a few reasons here. Firstly, the after-work crowds was always nonsense. Especially in Australia and England, because their test match crowds are fine. So they weren't doing it for after-match crowds. They kind of said that. The reason to move a game into prime time, the reason is to move the game into prime time for TV. That's where it makes more money. So a day-night test makes Cricket Australia a lot more money in the rights situation than any other game. So traditionally, even though Boxing Day and SCG tests were during the height of the summer holidays, and so people could watch them, the Perth test made as much money in the TV rights and was worth as much to them. And the reason being is that Perth is a different time zone, and that actually pushes the game into day-night. And that's where the idea comes from. They realized that if they could get all the test matches into that evening session, it would work a lot better. So they went for it. And it's been successful. The pink ball is still an issue. I think that it's kind of offset a little bit by the fact that pink ball games are so short. So maybe having 2 or 3 of them wouldn't particularly work. There's no point having them for Melbourne or Sydney because they're already working. Perth tried one. That doesn't make any sense because they actually made the test too late in that situation. So then you need the right time zones. So the only places that are left are Adelaide, Brisbane, and you can play one in Hobart as well. But the problem with Hobart is the same problem that you have in England, which is that even though it can be warm during the day in Hobart, it can get very cold at night. That was the issue with day-night games in England. In fact, if you watch an English summer, you will see that, if you're watching Blast cricket or, sort of anything, even the 100, have a look how often the TV presenters are rugged up. I remember there was an under-19 game once, which Mark Butcher had to interview both captains after the game, and he was just shaking because he was so cold. I can't remember where the game was, but I remember sending him a message afterwards to go, dude, put a jumper on. That's how cold it is. I've covered both the day-night game, or is it just one? Was it the 2017 one? I think I've covered the English one. So yeah, it just doesn't work. It's not a situation that is works particularly well in England because of that. What could work in England is the thing that they haven't tried as much, which is sort of more of a, can we push the game back a little bit? And that's the thing I think that they need to sort of work out in England, of trying to get it so that at least you get one session in prime time and the other one sort of at the end of the work day. So if you played from 1 to 3 and then had a break from 3 to 3:40 or 3 to 3:20, I suppose they do now, then you would have, from 3:20 through to 8:39, whatever that may be, of cricket. I think that's a good one to be able to look at. So that might be something that we will see more of into the future. But it just doesn't work in the same way. England don't even play as many day-night ODIs as other countries. I'm pretty sure I've looked that up before. So that puts England out. In a lot of these other places, there is issues with, with conservative cricket boards that don't like day-night tests. Not everyone likes day-night tests. I'm a bit surprised that New Zealand and South Africa haven't got more involved in them. There might be particular reasons. Dew can be a problem in some places, so you can't play it everywhere. In Asia, there's a different kind of cricket culture watching. I still think you should move it more to prime time. But again, a lot of cricket boards don't like the pink ball. Australia was always ahead on day-night games. This has been the case for a long period of time. and there are reasons why you can do it. I still think we will get to a point one day that if Test cricket sticks around, you might have 30 to 40% of games being day-night. But if the pink ball doesn't get fixed, then you can see why boards are like, well, what's the point in having this? So it is a confusing thing. I said from the start, if you go back, you can find my writing on this in whenever it was first mentioned. And remember, I went to first class games in the 90s that were day-night. This is the billion-dollar idea to save Test cricket, and they still haven't worked it out. And that's partly because no one really runs Test cricket. And it's also partly because whose money needs to go into fixing the ball, right? That's a big, big issue. I followed this quite a bit at the start, and I wrote an article for Cricinfo, maybe even Good Areas, and ABC, putting in my findings. I think there's been about $3 or $4 million invested in pink ball technology for what is a potentially billion-dollar idea going forward. If they fix the ball, I think a lot of other boards would be much happier doing it. But at the moment, it can be really random. And pink ball games are so fascinating because they're either completely dominated by the ball or the ball goes soft and everyone makes runs. How good is Joel Paris? I'll get that out now. Joel Paris. So Joel Paris was a bowler in Western Australia. What would he be now? I'll just have a look at his. He's 32 now. He had an IPL contract at one stage. Left arm bowler. He played 2 one-days. I was going to say he played one. He's just been injured his entire career. His first-class bowling average, just for everyone's attention, is 52 games, 203 wickets, at an average of 19. In fact, outside of T20s, where he did actually go the distance a little bit, he was just unplayable at times. I think he was a very, very... I think as a left-arm bowler, he was very highly skilled. He played, again, today, didn't he? Was it today? I haven't looked at that game. Did the Vicks win? The Vicks did not win. Yeah, so he helped beat Victoria today. They made 285, and he takes 4 for 62. So he's just a natural wicket taker. I think he's very highly skilled. If it wasn't for injuries, he probably would have played for Australia. I think there was always an element of Mitchell Starc being in his way, not helping. There's only so many left-arm bowlers, they're going to go in. Plus, it's a really good bowling lineup. So he could have played for another team and been successful. He probably would have played a lot more international cricket had it not been for Australia's Big Three. Miley Styrus, which is a great name, says, growing up, I used to see a lot of fast bowlers' shoes have a hole cut out to protect their big toe. Why is it less common now? Is the footwear better? Are the biomechanics of quick bowling adapted to ease the load on the front foot? Sadly, the biomechanics have not changed. You still see bowlers do it. You're right, it's not as common. I think a lot of it was that they thought the fast bowlers needed the big solid shoes, and now they're understanding that actually what they need is different kinds of shoes. If you go to Me Plus You, which is the Karen Pollard shoe brand, and they've given me some shoes. I'll probably got one under here. There are lots of different kinds of shoes now. And I think that if you go back traditionally, that wasn't the case. And so I know that I was talking to the other founder of Me Plus You, and they were basically talking about the fact that, when they do a deal with a player to come on board, they realize how different everyone's needs are. That just wasn't a thing before. And one way to get rid of the pressure was just cutting a hole in the end of the boot. I'm pretty sure there are still players who do it. But yes, I think the footwear has just changed. It would be my major guess on that one. Leo says, has the flipper disappeared from contemporary wrist spinners' repertoires? I don't hear commentators talk about it on air like they did during Warne's early years. Has it been superseded by the slider, the one that slides on? Okay. So I think I talked about this recently somewhere, and I can't remember where I was. I also don't know where my cricket ball is. Oh, it's down here. I was trying to explain something on the Ashwoods podcast, and I was looking for my ball and couldn't find it anywhere. It was so frustrating. So a flipper, and this is obviously if you listen to the audio podcast, it won't really work. But a flipper basically, where do I need to be here? A flipper basically is like flicking your fingers. I won't do it because I will smash everything on my desk. But a flipper is putting the ball in between your fingers and then clicking your fingers, right? It does not look like a leg spinner at all. That's the key thing that you need to know about a flipper. Whereas a slider is basically a leg spinner that you kind of stop. The ball still revolves around like a leg spinner. It's just that you haven't put enough revolutions on the ball to actually make it spin or spin a lot. So it can either when I started bowling the slider properly, I could make it drift like a leg spinner, but go straight. So in the mind of a batter, that was my most dangerous ball, because in the mind of a batter, they're like, oh, okay, this is a leg spinner, and it's drifting in, but then it would just go dead straight. So as long as I pitched it in the right area and got it, hitting around middle and off on the pads, it was a really, really big delivery, right? So it's harder to pick. It does basically the same thing. I just think it's a better delivery than the flipper. Now, the flipper specifically was probably very good in a sort of a pre-TV era. But if you go back through the entire history of cricket, Leo, have a look how many people could bowl it. There's like a handful. It's maybe 6 or 7 people. And you've got people like Imran Tahir and Kumble. There's another leg spinner I've forgotten as well, who can bowl it, but they bowl it like once in every 100 or 200 deliveries anyway. Like, it's not a major part of their arsenal. Once people started to understand this delivery, I think it naturally faded out. But from Clary Grimmett to Shane Warne, I think you've got like 2 or 3 leg spinners who had this delivery. And even then, they barely bowled it. Like, really, between Grimmett and Shane Warne, no one bowls it consistently. So when does Grimmett finish? Like 38? And Warne starts in 92? So Abdul Qadir could bowl it. Richie Beno could bowl it. There's a couple of others that I'm forgetting. But Chandrasekhar might have had one as well. But they barely bowl it, right? And so Shane Warne bowls it and then realizes there's a better ball that is easier to deliver. Flipper is so hard to deliver. So I just think there's a better ball that came about. That doesn't mean that there isn't I think now with T20 cricket, because it is quicker, because of the way it fizzles out, even if you could pick it, there might be a situation where you could still use it in modern T20 cricket, but no one's really brought it back. It's very rare. Most times, most times when someone says a flipper, even on commentary, it's still a slider. Hurt says, people credit Dhoni and CSK for a million things, and a new one pops up every single day. The one that keeps doing the rounds is the idea that CSK with Dhoni behind the stumps is basically a finishing school for spinners and young bowlers, but how much of that is actually true, and how much of that is fans hyping it up? No, I think it's a big part of it. So much so that I've talked to South African spinners who've said that Faf du Plessis playing at CSK allowed him to learn from Dhoni in the way that he treated spinners. And that one of the reasons they think there's so many more spinners in South Africa now is because Faf plays for CSK. So that is certainly something that is true. If you go back to Jadeja, he was very much run by by Dhoni, whereas Ashwin is just his own creature, right? But if you go back and you can watch I think Sid Monga might have written a piece of, like, in some ways that the relationship between Dhoni and Jadeja is more, I want to say interfering, but interfering's not the way I want. Like, interventionalist, maybe is the word I want, in that he's just involved all the time. And so, yeah, I think there are probably other situations where keepers have helped, especially very smart keepers before, but they're not always captains as well. I think in Jadeja's case, we saw that, and I think we see it with younger spinners as well. Dhoni is much more involved with a spinner than a normal captain will be. Karen says, wrists seem to play a huge role in batting, especially for Asian players like Azhar, me and Dad, VBS. Even Kohli uses them brilliantly, but centre batters rarely show the same level of wrist work. Is that mainly because of pitch conditions? Yeah, it's mainly to do with the pitches. It's like, if you think about an England player, there are England players with great wrists, obviously, and they have come through. But in England, you really want to be showing, and New Zealand, you really want to be showing the full amount of the bat all the time, right? Like, that is because of the lateral movement, especially from faster bowlers. And then for in Australia and South Africa is probably a hybrid of these two places. Again, you're probably more likely to use the full face of the bat, and because the ball is coming a little bit quicker. So in South Africa, you've got lateral movement and you've got a little bit of extra speed. And Australia, you've got speed. So it's harder for you to play with the wrist. If you look at the Australian players who are probably more, who use their wrist more, it would probably be places like Adelaide and Sydney. So I'm thinking Mark Ward, Darren Lehman. Does Michael Clark, would he count as a player like that? I'm trying to think of some of the others. Whereas that sort of more straight bat type of player is probably more what the other states, I'm trying to think of they're real. I can't think of many Victorian Queensland players that would be considered risky. I mean, Dean Jones had a shot across the pads. I'd say that was more like Kevin Peterson's. I'd say less and less like Mohamed Azharuddin. So yeah, I think there's a big part of that. I think it's the pace that the ball comes off the wicket, which allows you probably to do more with it. It might also be other sports might play a small part here. Other sports that people play, and then maybe it is a touch of biology, right? There might be something that means the only player I'm aware of who can get his middle finger back to his arm is Murali, right? But I know a lot of Asian players who are very flexible in the wrist in a way that other players, Western players, are typically not. So maybe there's a part of it, but I would say the pitches probably play the biggest part, and because of that, it may look like that other players are, wristy or whatever that may be. By the way, when I worked on cricket balls, if someone would just call a player wristy when they weren't wristy, but they're Asian, we would make fun of them for being racist. Reese says, what's it like working with Bumble for TalkSport? He feels like a man England should have kept around for longer, even if not as a coach, because his knowledge is incredible. Yeah, I think when he lost the coaching job, he was offered the TV job straight away. So I don't know what the ECB could have even kept him around with at that point. Sky were probably put a big chunk of money in front of him. I remember the first time I worked with him, and he was kind of in his own bubble, not his own bumble. And I remember commentating with him, being like, I've got no chemistry with this guy. It's not working. And then once I worked out how to work with him, and I know him really well, I could just set him up perfectly, and sort of get him where I want him to be. And he does the same with me now. He's just such a brilliant broadcaster. Like, it's hard to explain. Like, I've worked with many great broadcasters in my life, but his ability to work out the moment, the time, and everything, especially at his age, because he shouldn't be as sharp anymore. He probably should be just more monologues on his own now, but he's still very good at understanding his space and then the space of other people. He's also very good at stepping back. So some people that are similar to Bumble, it's very hard to work with, because once they get on a roll, they don't allow you any space. Whereas Bumble will do that and then be like, oh, wait, Jarrod's on here. Let's give this to Jarrod. Or John's got to call this bit. So it's really, really interesting to do that. He's, said some very nice things about my work, and, obviously has helped out. He's been brilliant to work with. There's no doubt about that. Josh says, my proposal is that the final of the Asia Cup should involve 3 T20 ODIs, 3 T20s, 3 ODIs, and 3 tests. I think it'd sell out prior to the tournament starting. Yeah, we should have multiple games in finals. I 100% agree. I don't know why we don't do that. Kerry Packer did it. Why can't we go back to that? Lemon says, is there anything to be said for great English players having lower peaks than other grades? I'm thinking of Root, Cook, or Anderson, who haven't had the peaks of players like Smith, Steen, or Tendulkar, but are still indisputably greats. Is that maybe grind? I think you've just picked 3 players who are better than the 3 English players. I think that's all you've done. I think Len Hutton and Jack Hobbs's peak was incredible. I think Ian Botham's had Ian Botham might be one of the biggest peaks of all time. And you have to say that Ben Stokes and Flintoff have had peaks. I'm trying to think of it. Yeah, like even someone like Graham Thorpe had a fantastic peak, didn't he? For someone who doesn't have a high average. So yeah, I think you've just picked 3 players where there are 3 better players. I don't think you've picked, that's all you've done there. I don't think you've quite got to the nub of it. Trying to think. I mean, Sid Barnes had a pretty good peak. Herbert Sutcliffe had a pretty good peak. Wally Hammond had an incredible peak. There's been some peaks. Sashimi says, I don't think Viv Richards should be in the GOAT conversations for ODI cricket, simply because no one took ODIs seriously when he played. Basically, he played in the Plumbers League. You can't compare him to what Virat has faced against competition Sachin faced. Okay, Sashimi, then you can't put Sachin in. Because most of the cricketers in the 90s also didn't take one-day cricket seriously. This is the problem with stuff like this, right? Is that you don't know enough about the history to know that even in Sachin's career, Sachin took one-day cricket seriously. The vast majority of players in the 90s did not take it seriously, right? It's nonsense. When it comes down to it, so you say here, we can respect him like we do Wilt Chamberlain, but no serious person will ever put him up there with MJ, Kobe, or Steph. That's because MJ, Kobe, and Steph have numbers that are actually, when you look at their entire career and the amount of times they won and the actual impact that they had, where Will Chamberlain had a couple of incredible years and some brilliant seasons, but didn't win all that much, right? Lots of people put Will Chamberlain still up on that level. I would say that Will Chamberlain, that is a completely different conversation. Viv Richards is better at one-day cricket than Will Chamberlain is at basketball. And he did it against, when you say no one took it seriously, they also bowled with the red ball, which was harder, right? It's just, I'm sorry, it's a nonsense opinion. And to say that it was in a plumbers league it's not a plumbers league when you're going up against Dennis Lilly, mate. Right? Like, fuck off. What the fuck are you talking about? Right? Like, that's just, it's pure. If you're facing Richard Hadley and Dennis Lilly, right? England came up with many theories in the 80s on how to play one-day cricket. They didn't work. They came up with many theories. He would have had to go up against young Pakistani seamers at times as well, right? He would have, teams were thinking about one-day cricket. It's certainly not the way that we're at now. And you're right, they didn't take it as seriously. They didn't take it as seriously in the 1990s either. AB de Villiers and Virat's early T20 careers also then could be thrown out, right? So I'm sorry, it's not a good opinion, and I wouldn't say it publicly. Parv says, both Russell and Pollard chose to retire from the IPL and take up management positions in the IPL franchise teams rather than try to play for other teams. Is that the best way to go for players beyond their primes? Most players in other sports have a few years of weaker teams when they are still somewhere useful. I think what they're doing here, and I could be wrong, I haven't talked to either of these guys, but I think what they're doing is they realize that they will always be useful to their franchises. But what they might do, and I think Pollard did this directly, is he continued to play in other leagues. And I think that Andre Russell will. So when you say they're playing in weaker teams, which is, traditionally what you might get, or you might get more, be on the bench longer or as a fringe player or whatever that may be. I think in this case, what these players are doing is they're like, well, we no longer seem to be a major IPL level. They've probably got really good deals to stick around, which might be the same amount of money they would be paid by another IPL team. And then they can top that up by playing in other leagues if they want to. That would be my guess. Ellie says, how much of a market do you see for A tournaments? Can it be the equivalent of Development G League in a hypothetical scenario where the ICC does govern cricket? Yeah. I mean, I think it would work on TV. I think you would get a whole fan base that would be involved in it. I've said this before. If we had like a proper second tier of Test cricket or an A thing, like people like me would watch, right? Is it enough to make money from it? Maybe not, but I'm not sure if the G League is massively profitable. But it's not just about profit, right? It's also about improving the game. Alex says, English county players are complaining about the 2026 schedule. How would you fix the schedule? What would you do with the 100? I have not followed this, Alex, so I can't help you 100% here. The way they've set up the summer, it should be that this is part of the problem with English summer. It doesn't quite work properly because it isn't as long or as summery as other places. But I think if it was me, I would just separate it into 4 different sections. Right? Is it 4? Blast. No, I would play the blast at the same time as the 100, and then everything else would be in 3 different sections. So you would probably do what they do in Australia, and I don't know how you do this, but you would try and have the one day as either early or late in the summer, and then you would play all the first class games kind of in one batch, maybe stop for the 100/blast and then come back and play them. This is just off the top of my head though, Alex, and I haven't seen the new schedule, so I don't actually know specifically what they're complaining about. Sashimi says, is cricket the most diversive sport in terms of body types? I don't know any sports that can have Temba Bavuma, Janssen, Ruckin Cornwall, Virat Kohli, Pollard, Harath. Yeah, I've said this before. I think occasionally you will get, I'm trying to remember the sport that does this. I think occasionally you'll get like an American sport putting up a photo of 2 athletes and going, oh, look how diverse our sport is. And it's like, well, it's not diverse, right? Like compared to cricket, it's not even close to being diverse. Microphone just fell behind me. So yeah, I think cricket is really, really high up there in that sort of stuff. I'm trying to think of anyone another sport. Um, I can't think of many off the top of my head. I suppose things like shooting maybe might be diverse. Is golf another one? Um, but yeah, I think cricket's fascinating from that point of view. I've tried to talk about this before. People don't like it, but like I do think that we might get to a point a bit like American football or American or basketball, perhaps, or baseball. So American sports in general, where we do start to sort of push people with certain body types into roles specifically at a younger age, which can cause issues as it has in America before. Mob Geek says South Africa's 408 run victory in Guwahati in the second test was partly fueled by the piles of lower order runs from South Africa. To what extent does this vindicate selectors who stockpile batting talent in a test batting lineup, or does this perhaps send the wrong message? Um, well, I mean, India has been doing the same thing, so you know, I would never worry about a one-off test mob of like, oh, this happened in this one test, so it validates this or whatever. You're looking at things over a long period of time when you look at stuff like that. I still think there is, and this might be the last generation we have it. I still think there's a possibility of having one team with just incredible all-round talent that is really, really deep, that is successful, and maybe it's South Africa, maybe it's India. I don't know, maybe even Australia or England again, or New Zealand could come back and do that. But when it comes down to it, I think if you don't pick your four best bowlers over a long period of time, chances are other teams will beat you. Ganji says, your ideal lineup for an Indian test team at home. What is this, all time? If it's all time, I'll have Gavaskar, Sehwag, Dravid, Tendulkar. Who do I want at 5? Who do I want at 5? Who's the best Indian number 5? Or do I just move someone else down there? I don't know. Could Kohli bet at 5? I'll put Kohli at 5. Rishabh Pant, Ravi Jadeja, Ashwin. Kumble misses out then, doesn't he? But I've got extra batting in that side. I don't know how many spots I have left. Bumrah and other seam bowlers. Does that sound about right? Adityan says, is there a case to be made to bat Jadeja at 8 below Sundar and Akshar or NKR whenever he plays? Jadeja might still be the better batter, but it might be a good idea to give Sundar and Akshar their long-term position. Yeah, I've been kind of thinking of this myself. Look, this is the sort of thing why it's great to have Robbie on. It'd be interesting to know what Robbie thinks of this, because you have to sell this to Jadeja. There are some players who'd be like, yep, fine, done, I'm in. And then the other players would be like, wait, why am I getting demoted? For people who are going to be my replacements, maybe one day. I'm still here and I can still play for another 6 months, 6 months, 4 years, 3 years, whatever it may be. So I think you can make a claim that this works, but it's really, really tricky. And this is the sort of decision that you make. It's like the Johnny Bairstow, Joss Butler one, right? You make a decision which you think, oh, okay, this can help us and we do this and this. And then you realize what long-term effects it might have. But yeah, I kind of feel the same. I think if it was me, I would want Washi to bat ahead of Jadeja from here on in. I'm not sure I worry about Akshar as much. James says, last episode's question about outstanding series by bowlers in a losing series. How about Terry Alderman, 81 Ashes? Yeah, that's another good one. I've forgotten about that because he kind of, remember that he wins the series in 89. I suppose Rodney Hogg what year was Rodney Hogg? 78, 79? I think, is probably another one. So there's a couple of big ones from Australian bowlers that I could think of. There must be some Fazal Mahmood, Murali, Adley ones as well. Although generally when those guys did well, their teams did win. Rohit says, is there a way to account for the true strike rate according to the team combination? For example, a top order batsman who has to play a lot more cautiously because of a non-existing middle order, be it in any format. No, there is not. The same way that there is no way to account for in batting average, right? If your role is to get on with it and you're going to go out quicker. There's no real way of being able to do that in general. That's something that you have to do subjectively later on is go, well, one of the reasons is like, so we talk about this a lot with Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli. I think in our good areas team, we just think they could have scored quicker. We think they should have scored quicker, but we also think that they could have if it wasn't for the fact that that Shikhar Dhawan, Rohit Sharma, Virat Kohli partnership for years was told to go long and be cautious at the start, right? So I think you have to factor that in when you're talking about these players. Abe says, you've said previously that ball tampering is basically universal. Not basically, universal. Do you have a suggested solution? Can't speak. Yes, I do. Every cricket ground in the world should have a camera that follows the ball all the way through the game. There we go. Hurt says, first half of 2026 is packed with T20 action with WPL, WT20 and IPL back-to-back-to-back. Any danger of a daily sort show, third inning style, analysing and ranting about the game of the day? Oh, I have no idea. That's what we're doing next year. There's a lot happening at good areas at the moment and beyond. PJ says, your dad, a husband, a small business owner. You read, write, record, film, produce, and podcast. It's making me sound like, what's that movie? How does she do what she does? It's got a different title, but it's basically that. Occasionally in the summer, you've done the whites to slog a few across the line. I don't slog as much as I used to because I can't bowl. You watch cricket, commentate, and even watch basketball. You also interact with intellectuals such as Hertz Mob and myself on Discord. How do you manage your time? I think this is probably like the neurodiverse question, without it being a neurodiverse question. I don't feel there are more. I just, I work with a lot of different people, across, professionals and younger people now. And most of the time, people are filling up their periods of the day with things they don't need to do. They're getting involved in conversations online that they don't need to be involved with. They're getting conversations offline with people that they don't need to be involved with. They're doom scrolling. They're whatever it may be, right? I think for whatever it is with me, generally most of my time has always been fairly productive. I also work quicker than a lot of other people, which I think is a huge thing. I think if you compare me to people like Jeff Lemon and Sid Monga, who are both incredible, professionals, Fidel Fernando would be another one. I would say that I could write a piece in a fraction of the time that those guys could write their pieces. That you can argue whether one's better, one's worse, whatever. But as far as actual word tonnage, I'm so much quicker. There's a guy called Chris Stocks in the UK who is probably the only person who types quicker than me. Or writes quicker than me, I should say. Maybe there's other guys who can type quicker than both of us. But when it comes out of me, it really does come out very quickly. So again, there isn't a lot of fat on it. I think there's things I guard, like, I guard my time with my family. We don't do a lot of night podcasts anymore because, I've tried to bring them back into the daytime. So, accommodate them that way. I'm kind of, I don't know. I don't really know how to answer this. I just, when I work, and when I don't work, I don't work. And I'm not sure that's the case for every single person having, and I was always the same, even when I, worked in call centers. I've said this before, like I worked in a call center where like 80 calls a day was considered good and I could do 150. So there is definitely a reason why I'm able to fit more things into a space than other people, but I don't know exactly what that is. Rob says, what's your thoughts on QDK? Is he chronically underperforming considering his talent because he doesn't give a fuck? Or am I being overly harsh on him as an opening batter keeper? I've always thought he was quite a limited player. I think if you go through, I think Varun always jokes that that I'm softer on QDK than anyone else. And I always have been. I think he's a very, very talented player. I don't think he always makes the best decisions. I think he gets lost in innings sometimes. I think he sort of gets in a period where he plays the same shot over and over again when he doesn't need to. I think maybe Test cricket is his best format and he doesn't play it, which is a bit of an issue. I think he's a quality player in other form, but I don't think he's a legendary player. Um, yeah. So I'm probably not the right person to ask on this. Mob says, imagine Temba Bavuma, South Africa, scheduled to play Tom Leith New Zealand in a one-off neutral test. Who is taller? No, okay. I thought that's what he was going to say. To determine the greatest team in the universe. Who wins this Chinnaswami battle of the short kings? Assuming KJ, yeah, everyone is fit. And who wins that game? South Africa. I don't think I'd have New Zealand particularly close in that game. Ajit says, who do you think is a cricketer people overlooked until they finally left the game? Some people, my friends, have suggested Dilshan, Ajit Agakar, BJ Watling, and Damien Martin. I don't know. Dilshan definitely had his time in the sun, didn't he? It was probably brief, but it was very bright. Ajit Agarkar, it depends on what format you're talking about. I think that's just format bias. If you look at his entire career, it maybe looks a bit bleh. But, I mean, what did he do? Let's have a look here. What did he do just in one-day cricket? Yeah, average of 27, economy at 5, a little bit expensive, but a really good strike bowler, I would have thought, taking a wicket every, 33 balls. But that's his format bleed because he wasn't very good in Test cricket, right? So, BJ Watling, I don't think people understood how good BJ Watling was. But again, that's a really weird role. You've got like these really dynamic or stylish, like Dinesh Chandimal and Matt Pryor, MS Dhoni into Rishabh Pant, Brad Haddon. Like there's lots of Quinton de Kock, we just mentioned before. Lots of teams have like a wicketkeeper who bats, but maybe they bat exciting or look better. BJ Watling basically is a blocker, and then a blocker at number 6. So I think that's just a role that you overlook, and he's also coming in behind Taylor and Williamson, right? So they're always going to get the credit in that. Damien Martin, again, it's just I think these are just players that like there were other players around them. Like Damien Martin was fantastic, right? But it's a short period of time. It's a great batting era. Like we looked at him for the book, and you just can't make a claim that he should be in it. So yeah, I think there is certainly an element there of him not being quite remembered. But he's got Ricky Ponting at the other end, right? He's got Hayden and Langer and Gilchrist around him. Everyone's making runs. I'm trying to think of some players that maybe make more sense on this sort of thing. I don't think Vernon Philander probably quite got the credit that he should have got. A lot of people feel the same about Hashim Amla. I think Hashim Amla did, but again, there were so many players around him. He probably gets more credit than Damien Martin, but it's a similar kind of thing. I don't think people understand the role that Moeen Ali played. So there's like a player like that who probably frustrated during his career, but if you look back on it, it's like, no, it made sense. It's just that the way they used him didn't always make sense. I feel like there's another Kiwi, and I've forgotten the name. If you go back, someone like Danny Morrison, who sort of takes over a New Zealand bowling attack that is struggling and is never going to be the main bowler. He's probably. I always thought of Danny Morrison would have been a great like second or third best bowler in your side. What's he end up with? 160 wickets at 35. But him being the frontline bowler, like it probably was the wrong position. He's much better at one-day cricket as well. So we know that. I think he would have been more interesting. Chaminda Vaas, maybe is another guy I would put up there. Sam says, there seems to be a disconnect between Bazball England with a bat compared to the ball. I asked this to, what's that guy's name? Robbie. I asked this to Robbie, Sam. I saw this question pop up in my email box and I really liked it. So basically what Sam is saying is that with the bat, England is completely inflexible, and with the ball, they are almost unable to be solid. Right. So in one case, they're like, this is the way we play. We're going to do it. Another one was like, this is the way we play. No, it's this. No, it's this. No, it's this. And it's really, really interesting. So they're both extreme outlier positions, but in a completely different way. In one, we're saying they should be more patient. And the other one, we're saying that they should be more impatient. Is that right? Patient. Oh, no, we're actually saying they should be patient in both cases. But in one, we're saying they change too much, and one, we're saying they change too little. That's what I meant to say. I'll get that eventually. I saw the word impatient in the end of the question. I think this is what you are seeing, Sam, is how Ben Stokes thinks about cricket on the cricket field. And you don't see this a lot. We saw this with Dhoni. We saw this with Morgan. We might have seen it with guys like Briley and Jardine back in the old days. Maybe a little bit in Mark Taylor, Stephen Fleming. It's very rare that, like Brendan McCullum would be another one as well, where the team actually just becomes almost the puppets of the captain's ideas. You have to get them to buy into it. They have to be really good ideas. There needs to be some level of success, all these different things. But I think that's what you're seeing with Ben Stokes is this is kind of how he thinks. And you get the good of that and you get the bad of that, right? And I think it was Robbie who said, we praised Ben Stokes on the flat pitches and we have to say here he didn't develop. And maybe that's, if you look at Ben Stokes as a cricketer, that's probably one of the things, right? Of his ideas really, really work or they don't work at all. And that's why Bazball and Ben Stokes have not been as consistent as cricketers as they could have been. James says, Australia has a number of key players over or near 35. Do you see any evidence of Cricket Australia has learned from previous situations like this? Or are they headed for another Chappell, Lily Marsh, Warren, McGrath, Langer situation? So if you're a casual fan or you're a fan from out of Australia, you won't know much about this. But basically, Chappell, Greg Chappell, Rodney Marsh, and Dennis. I just realized there's like multiple Chappells and Marsh. Not everyone will know who that is. And Dennis Lillee all retire at the same time. And Australian cricket just jumps off a cliff in a way that it has never before. Right? Probably close to its lowest period outside of the actual Packer thing. And they talk about it non-stop for decades. Every time anything happens in Australian cricket, it's mentioned. And yet then it happens again when Warne, McGrath, and Langer do it. I think Australian cricket can be as professional as they want. They can be as forward-thinking as they want. When it comes down to it, a lot of this is cyclical. They knew when McGrath and Warne were going that they had 4 young fast bowlers that they thought could be incredible. You know, Cummins was, was it 06 or 07? No, they might not have known about Cummins. I think they knew about Hazelwood at that point. I think they knew about Stark. I'm trying to think of when I was first told all these names. 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, around 8, 9. So I think they knew there was another crop coming. They were big on to Mitchell Johnson as well. They had, they still had Michael Clark in the team. They had Ricky Ponting. They had a bunch of other players that were coming through. They thought they'd done enough and they hadn't. There's no actual way to stop this. So I did a piece years ago. There's a guy online who always writes articles saying how wrong I was about these things. And when I wrote, they used to be, I don't know if he's still around, but when I wrote about the 13-14 team, having, that was it for England. That was the end of that run, right? And he was like, what is he talking about? We've got Ben Stokes, we've got Joe Root, we'll be fine. But what he hadn't accounted for is they needed to come back up again, right? And I knew that what I was really saying is it was the end of this era of the team, and there would be a natural regression, and then they would start to regroup. And they did. And in fact, with the wobble ball, they got really, really good again, not long after that, even if it wasn't at the same level as they were when they were number 1 in the world. But there generally is that kind of dip. We're seeing it with India right now, right? Like India is much better set up than Australia was in 06, 07 to handle Ashwin going out of the side, right? Than Australia was for Warne and McGrath. And yet, we still are seeing a violent rollback. So I think you have to be honest, James, and just be like, these things happen. You prepare as well as you can to make them not happen, and then they sometimes happen anyway. James says, with Jadeja and Lyon aging, do South Africa now have the best left arm finger spinner and off spinner in the world? I'd still pick Jadeja over. I'd still, if I was going into a test match, I'd pick Jadeja over Maharaj. Maybe even Akshar over Maharaj. But there's not much in it at the moment. Would I pick Lyon or would I pick Harmer? I might pick Harmer because he can bat a bit more. It's so hard because Lyon's bowled so little of recent times. I feel like I would take Harmer. But yeah, it is tricky. I think I'd still... I was going to say I'd take Washington, but maybe I wouldn't take Washington right now. Yeah, so maybe. I mean, I get your point. It's not far off. I'm not sure it's quite right. Uh, Abe says, if GG rang you up ahead of the next July's test selections and asked, mate, who fixes my number three headache? Are you telling him to stick beside Sadashan or to switch him out for someone like Safaraz or Iswaran? And who do you think Sadashan was picked over? And why do you think Sadashan was picked over these two in the first place? Iswaran is not a number three, though, is he? Like, as in, I know he's bad at number three, but is it? Oh, I'd have to go and look into his numbers. I thought he might have also played in has been an opener, whereas I think they would think Sadashan was a natural number three. Sarfraz is not a number three. I think Sarfraz is definitely a number four, probably a number five. That's the reason. That's not the reason. Obviously, Gambier has some issues with him, but that's the reason that I think you can make a fairly decent claim that that's where he should be batting. I don't see him as a number three at all. I think you're almost setting him up to fail. I'd probably go with Sadashan a little bit longer because I just think you give him another series and a half, and then they weren't making runs with their number three before, and they're not making them now. Give someone a decent run and see if that's the case. Does anyone really think that Sadashan is worse than like Ollie Pope? Like realistically, so give him a go, see how it works. If it doesn't work, that's fine. You can try someone else, but that's the way I would do it. Ian says there have been some great bowlers who absolutely can't bat. A great historical example is Bill Bowes. 1,351 wickets at under 16 and only 1,254 runs in his career. Who are some of the other great players that could have been better off batting at 12 than 11? Who would you have? Chris Martin, Chandrasekhar, Glenn McGrath. What's Phil Tufnell's record? I feel like Phil Tufnell doesn't get mentioned a lot. Wasn't he really comically bad? Danny Morrison, Courtney Walsh are two guys that sort of come up as well. Oh. So 42 tests for Tufnell, 153 runs. That's actually a lot of runs. That's more than I would have got, but an average of 5. Yeah. Morrison, Tufnell. Trying to think back of some of the older guys. Couldn't bat at all. I suppose there's a ratio that you could work this out with, which is how many. I know it's not exactly fair if you're always batting at number 11, but you just have to work out like what players had a ratio of similar runs to wickets. I suppose that's the best way of thinking about that. Jeremy says, how significant in his overall legacy should Steve Smith's statistical drop-off be in the third innings be? It's not that much different to Brian Lara's, is it? And there's actually a lot of great players who don't make many runs in the fourth innings. It's almost in some ways, it's almost a different sport towards the end than it is at the start. I've got a feeling that Gavaskar does the opposite. So there are players that struggle when the pitch is a little bit fresher, and they get really good. I think it's something you have to look at. But if you're the greatest, or in his case, the second greatest first innings player and the second greatest second innings player, I think that pops you back up to the top of the list. But he doesn't have the flexibility. Like, what's better? And this is a genuine question. Is it better to average roughly 50 in all 4 innings? Or is it better to average 69 to 70 in the first 2 innings and then, whatever that would be, 30 for the rest? Because you're probably setting up so many games that maybe it doesn't matter. Like, we get really fascinated with, like, great chasing records in ODI, right? Bevan and Dhoni and Pollard and Kohli and these sorts of guys, Gale. But does that mean that we're overlooking all the guys who've just set up the game? Like, I always thought about this with Ricky Ponting. I always had a friend who would say, oh, Ricky Ponting doesn't make a lot of clutch innings. Whereas, I don't know, Mike Hussey or whoever else was. And I was like, yeah, but it's harder to make clutch innings when you first drop. Because if he's played a really good innings, he's probably already changed the game, right? Like, clutch innings are either you're playing in a team where no one else can make any runs. And so you bat at first drop, but you end up batting with a number 7, number 8. Which in Ponting's case was fairly unlikely. And also, if you're like a Ponting or a Lara type player and you completely change the scope of the game by the way you play, they're even less likely to get wickets at the other end. And so I think this is a similar way that I would look at this particular question, Jeremy, which is if he's setting it up that much. I think the one that we always worry about is the guy's really good in third innings. That's the only time I'm massively concerned about that stat. But I'm interested in it, right? I am interested in it. And I think it does tell you that more technically correct players, and usually generally players who are better against the lower ball or the spinning ball, are better at the end of games. Person says, you mentioned in a wagon wheel that most people don't travel out of state for the Ashes, with the exception of traveling to Adelaide. Why is that? I think the Adelaide test is sort of, I don't know. Actually, I was going to say why. I don't know. Maybe it's slightly easier to get tickets to Adelaide. No, it shouldn't be, because MCG would be the easiest one to get tickets to. I've always sort of seen that as, I suppose, Adelaide. The problem with Melbourne and Sydney is that you're traveling in peak times. Like if you want to come to the Boxing Day test, you have to pay Christmas prices, right? So it's a lot more expensive if hotel or whatever else, airfare. Sydney is, again, straight after New Year's. So, again, I would assume that's peak time. Adelaide is close to Melbourne and Sydney in terms of flights, and you can even drive there from Melbourne. You could probably drive there from Sydney, but I think it'd be a bit of a hike. Are there trains from Sydney to Adelaide? I'm assuming there are. Yeah, there is, isn't there? The one that goes out west. So maybe you could even do it that way. So it's probably a little bit closer. Whereas you think about Brisbane, if you're in Adelaide, Melbourne, Hobart, or Perth, Brisbane is actually a long way away. So Adelaide's kind of in the middle a little bit more for that kind of travel. And so maybe it makes a little bit more sense to go there. It's a beautiful ground. The ground is in the middle of the city, so you can get a hotel kind of anywhere and walk out to the ground. Again, you can't do that at the Gabba. If you're going to Western Australia, that's a lot of so maybe it's just as much as anything, it's not that test match is not always during peak times, and it's a little bit easier for the vast majority of the country, which live in Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne, to get to Adelaide. Miley Cyrus says, are there differences in technique between left-hand batters who are left-hand dominant and left-hand batters who are right-hand dominant? Prominent right-arm lefties, Stokes, Warner, Nisha, McGilly, are all strong hitting through that. Yeah, so the thought being is that if you are standing on that side of the ball and you are a right-hander, your top hand becomes dominant. And so that becomes more of you are almost combining technique and power together, I think, is the idea of this, right? Whereas if you are, so your top hand is then the more powerful one. That means that your bottom hand is sort of following through. So you should have, I'm trying to think of this. So you can still hit to the leg side, but maybe you'll hit to the leg side with a straighter bat than someone who is their bottom hand is the dominant hand, and they're probably swiping with a more angled bat. Maybe, but I'm not 100% sure. It's a good question though. Reese says, is there a pace for the wobble ball to be effective? My mate's a seam bowler for our club, and he has tried to get it work. He bowls at 64 miles per hour, but can't. Only ask because clearly Darren Stevens is not that much quicker. So there isn't the wobble ball. Any ball, whether it be swing, seam, even spin plays a part here, but swing and seam for quick bowlers. So I can get the ball to swing double the amount of a normal person, like just big hooping, like so much so that I almost have to aim the ball down the leg side because I swing the ball so much, back when I used to bowl a little bit of medium pace occasionally. But because of the pace of it, it doesn't really beat the bat all that much. It causes other issues for players because it's such a weird angle that I can bowl at. But it doesn't actually beat the bat as much. And that's because you can adjust to the lack of pace. Now, if I bowled when I was younger and I could bowl outswing a little bit quicker and still get it to swing masses, I would beat the bat all the time, right? And the reason is it's that little, even though it was swinging slightly less, it's coming quicker, and so you can't adjust. So if he's bowling at 64 miles an hour, right, and he's getting it to seam a little bit, people should be able to actually handle that, right? If he's bowling at 64 miles an hour and he's getting Mohammad Siraj or Scott Boland level wobble deviation, they should not be able to handle that. It's also, is he bowling the right line and length for the wobble ball? The wobble ball is not just about what you do. It's the consistency of being able to bowl it from wider on the crease, angle everything into the stumps, and hit the top of off stump with almost every delivery, or the top of middle stump, depending on which kind of bowler you are, with almost every delivery you bowl. So has he got the right angle? Has he got the repetition right? And then when it seems, is it seaming enough at that speed? So, if you look at it, it's like, go back to Terry Alderman, who someone mentioned before. Terry Alderman swung the ball at the right pace to get wickets. You could swing it more than Terry Alderman and not get any wickets, and you could swing it less than Terry Alderman, right, but be a lot faster and still get wickets. So Brett Lee does not need to swing the ball the same amount that Matthew Hoggard or Jimmy Anderson does, right? So there is an optimum for those sorts of things, but it could be a bunch of different parts. Josh says, the privately owned New Zealand 20 feels like it is going to backfire for reasons I can't quite articulate. Who is actually wanting a private New Zealand T20 other than the players wanting a quick buck rather than sustainability? I think, and I have no reporting on this, I haven't even talked to anyone in New Zealand, but when I read this story, my first thought was, they're trying to say that they'll go it alone so that the Big Bash has to give them a bigger deal to bring their teams in. That was my first thought. The other way of looking at it is, let's say you make $200 million in capital from doing this, bringing in all the IPL owners, IPL resources, maybe more attention and everything else. Is there an element there that it's not like the money that the 100 got, but maybe that $200 million in New Zealand is, changes everything. I don't know, right? Like, honestly, I don't know. But my first thought when I heard this was they're trying to negotiate with Cricket Australia to get a better deal on their teams getting in the Big Bash, because it's obviously not going to work. This, like, as in long-term sustainability, there's so many other bigger tournaments on at that same time. I just and the IPL owners already own teams in South Africa and Dubai. Like, I just don't, and the Big Bash. There's too much. Ellie says, do you think the ODI format is the easier format to master for batters? Yes, because you get more time than you do in T20 cricket, so you can work out a method that will work for you. The ball goes softer as well. Red ball cricket's obviously just harder in general. So I think yes, but I think we're also, that's if you're playing it in a slightly more anchory way. I don't know if that's the case if you're a number 6, right? But if you're a top 3 player and your team just wants you to bat as deep as possible, then it's probably the easiest format. It's probably easier to be a number 4. Oh, it's pretty tricky to be a number 4 in T20 and ODIs. But it's probably easy to be a number 4 in ODIs still. I think it's probably easy to be a number 5, 6, 7 in T20 cricket. Oops. Adityan said, both Jimenez and you rate Varun over Kuldeep. Why is that? Is it because Kuldeep somehow becoming this defensive bowler and there are not a lot of elite strike options? No. It was just, there was a period of time when Varun was unplayable, right? I don't know. I think as good as Kuldeep has been, it's been a long time since he's been unplayable. I think he's playable. He's going to have moments where you struggle, but there was a point when no one actually knew how to play against Varun, and yeah, that's all it is. There's no other real reasons behind it. Well, not for me. Jimenez might be different. PJ says 2 years ago, Usman Khawaja was in with a shout to be one of the openers in an all-time Australia 11. Now, not so sure. Yeah, again, when we were writing the book, he got in such good form that we were like, oh, do we? And I think we looked at him, and he just wasn't quite there. I think Cheyenne liked him, and I just couldn't find a way. I think if we'd put him in the book now, it would look a bit silly because he has dipped off. I mean, that's a normal thing to have happen. Who would be your openers in the all-time Australia 11? First, second, and thirds. Oh my God, first, second, and thirds. So you would have, I'd probably go Hayden and Morris, Langer and Ponsford. Oh, wait. Let me do that. I forgot Laurie and Simpson in there. I've got, yeah, Hayden and Morris, Laurie and Langer. Although Langer did his in the season. Bob Simpson and Langer both. Laurie and Ponsford, Simpson and Langer. I think I've remembered everyone. Who else have you got on the list? Yeah, could maybe make a case for Warner over Langer as well. Would be the other one. I'm just looking if you've got any other names there. Oh, I'd Sid Barnes. Yeah. And then Trumper. Oh, I forgot Trumper as well. Okay. I'll try it one more time. See if I can get this right, PJ. Okay. I would have Hayden and Trumper, Morris and Ponsford, Laurie and Warner or Barnes. I think that's right. I've probably forgot other people now, but I think that's right. Rob says, Robbie Atoppa sounds like such a nice guy. Stop saying nice things about Robbie. And a very emotionally intelligent. Is he an outlier for cricketers? From the outside, most cricketers seem to be very bro-jock. Yeah, look, part of it just comes with who they're hanging out with, right? And how they come up. Like, it's not that they're not smart. It's just that you stay in a sort of perpetual adolescence as a cricketer or as a professional athlete. Quite often, and that's just where you go. Look, he is a very nice guy. I didn't know him before we started the podcast, but I did do a lot of research and talk to a lot of people. And I think I've talked about this before. There was about 7 or 8 guys that I thought about as potentials. And I thought that one reason I thought that Robbie would be good to talk about is that I'd watched him on a couple of podcasts, I'd watched him talk, and I'd listened to him interviewed a few times. And I realized that if he doesn't know about something, he'll still think about it. He won't just give you a pat answer. And that I think the emotional intelligence and the way he talked about depression specifically and weight loss and, getting yourself into that sort of zone was really important. And I'm looking for a cricketer who thinks. Like, they don't have to be smart. Like, I'm not saying Robbie isn't smart, but I'm looking for a cricketer who thinks. And those are the ones I have the most fun chatting to. He gets a lot of flack on the channel sometimes because it's like, all Jarrod's shows are about analysis. Well, they're not, are they? CricPix is not about analysis, right? A lot of Footmarks is about storytelling. We do heaps of storytelling. We do everything else. We're trying to uncover things about cricket. And I think with Robbie, he's a perfect person to be able to uncover that. It's going to be different than a show would be with Ashwin. It's going to be different than a show would be with, Mitchell Johnson, right? Everyone's slightly different, but there's reasons that you pick each person. And I think that, in Robbie, I kind of picked someone who was also willing to do it. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but, he has to make himself available every week. Not all former professional cricketers want to do that. He does the work. He thinks about the questions. He's a natural podcaster. Lots of little things that really work. But yeah, I think he's different than most cricketers. Generally, the cricketers I'm close with tend to be different than most cricketers, if that makes sense. I'm not particularly popular with the sort of normal cricketer type of person, but because they're nerds saying things he couldn't even face 85 miles an hour. Some of that is 100% accurate. Whereas I think the guys who are like, yeah, but look at the work he does, are the ones I generally get along with. And that's what I was looking for in a podcasting partner. I didn't think it would work this well, but it's been it's certainly something I look forward to doing every week. I absolutely love the show. I think me and Robbie can take it into areas that other podcasters can't. I think there was a super chat on the channel the other day of someone of just saying something along the lines of, it's not, there's plenty of other places to go and get funny content everywhere else. And I'm like, yeah, there isn't another place where you can get one of the top writers and broadcasters in the game and one of our World Cup winner talking openly and honestly on the same level, but from different vantage points. There is no other Kim Appa show. And Robbie could do a show with Sid Mongo and it would be fantastic. And I could do a show with, I don't know, Jimmy Adams or Chris Rogers or Kane Williamson, and it would be fantastic, right? But there's something very specific that works for Kim Upper. And I think a lot of people take it for granted because they think it's easy. It's not easy to have, to do what we do. And a lot of that comes down to him being open. Ajit says, did RCB find both the right balance of players, but also the right group of hungry players in 2025? Not saying that their careers were over, but with people like Patakal, Patida, Jidesh Krunel, did they tap into potential players who felt they had a point to prove? I think a lot of things just went right. Honestly, I've said this before. There's a lot of guys who just had career best bowling seasons. And that's what sort of happens. You could do a whole Moneyball book on this RCB, and I'm sure the people behind the scenes would love, I'm sure DK and Freddie and, some of the other people, who's the coach? Was it Andy Flower? So those guys would love to be able to tell you all that. And they're right. But then your analysis of that would be, well, Krunal Pandya had never had a bowling year like this before. If he just has a normal bowling year, you probably don't win the title. Like, sometimes it's as simple as that, right? And they're controlling the controllables, and then they got a good run on the uncontrollables. I just want to talk about the next test. This is the Rushline win probability section. So we've got Australia at 68% and England at 17%. I think that's even friendly to England. Having said that, the 15% draw is interesting in a day-night game. I don't know how many draws we've had in day-night games, or how many draws you've had in Australia without rain or anything from that perspective. Although, to be fair, the Gabba can get wet. But it does show what an uphill battle it is for England from here. And, if Australia win this game, then unfortunately that's kind of the end of the Ashes, right? But yeah, interesting stuff there from Rushline. I won't take a break because me and Bayram are going to be back in like a millisecond anyway. So what I'll do is I will just take the super chats, and then me and Bayram will take over. Jessica says, for the good areas war chest. Thank you very much. What a supporter she is. It's people like Jessica that make it all easier, right? The people who just get what you're doing, support you and everything else. So big shout out to her. Ram says a triangular test series between India, Australia, and England. So I think the complication here is probably, can you make more money from this than you can from India just playing it, from the three teams playing individually? So the only way they're going to do it is if they're going to make more money. I don't think it's a bad idea, Ram. It's just I'm not sure it's going to make money. And that's what, they're not going to do it unless they're positive it would make more. Barrett says, can you ask Robbie to throw in the hat for ICT coach? You and Robbie could set up the Indian team for 15 years in terms of using data and make way for talent. I don't think that's likely. I don't think Robbie's going, at this stage anyway, I think he's more looking at batting coaching positions rather than head coaching positions. But I could be wrong on that. Samit says, Kepler Wessels, opener in Australia's lean era. His first series is versus the West Indies team was epic. Then South Africa's post-readmission rot. How do you rate him across both stints? What's his legacy? Yeah, I mean, I think part of the problem with Kepler Wessels is he just doesn't play as much international cricket as he probably should have. What's he end up with? 40 test matches, 109 ODIs. I think he was a very good opener in the 80s in a time when it was hard to do so. I think maybe the bigger issue for him is that he was playing one-day cricket when he should absolutely never have played one-day cricket. 109 test matches, 109 ODI games for 100 and a strike rate of 55. He basically made these 60s off like 120 balls and stuff. It's hilarious going back through his old scorecards. And I think that ruins his legacy. But as a test player, he was tough. He knew what he was doing. It wasn't a pretty technique, but it made it work. And then really important for South Africa, right? You know, they had him and John Tracos come back with international experience. S. Judge says, do you think India's lineup in tests and white ball is getting messed up because of Washington? I mean, he's a very good player, but India are sacrificing vital batting positions to accommodate him. That's what you do for all-rounders. You take the punt because if it works, you have another Jadeja and it can completely transform your team forever. That's the punt that you do with the young all-rounders, and they usually come on slow. I think he's also been picked because he's left-handed though. Samit says Janssen bowls left arm at 140 plus, swings and wobbles it, and brings skyscraper bounce. Sure, the control wavers, but he's 24. Is he just the best pace prospect, or is he already crossed into full-blown fast bowling phenom territory? Yeah, the person to compare him to is Bruce Reed, and he has so many extra skills that Bruce Reed didn't have. I don't think he has Bruce Reed's accuracy though. So he does have to be more accurate and do it regularly. I think though he should be the toughest bowler in the world to face for the next decade. Whether he becomes an S tier all-time pacer is probably down to how often he can repeat the skills that he wants to repeat. If he can get to even like a semi-accurate bowler, like he's probably closer to Mitchell Starc at the moment, right? And you want him to be closer to Bruce Reed. He doesn't have to become like a Bruce Reed-like bowler, but if he can get to that level, I don't know how you play him. Honestly, I just don't know how you play him. Also, the other thing I would say is, I think he's a smart cricketer, but I don't always think he makes smart bowling options. He's only 24. So I assume he's going to get smarter with the ball, which will make him even worse. Abhishek to face, not is that the thing. Abhishek says, I recently saw a news clip style documentary of Australia's tour of the West Indies in 1995 on My World of Sports. Can you please suggest other old school cricket tour documentaries that you know of? There's heaps in Australia. I don't know the name, but we did that was a big thing in Australia that they used to do back in the day. And sometimes people put up also the DVD coverage is sometimes on YouTube. I don't know the names or the series. And 2001's a famous one. There's definitely one from 2001 Australia. There would be a couple of the Australia West Indies ones. But yeah, I'm not sure I can give you the exact name on that side of things. Dean says, should Markram be protected from the new ball and perhaps drop to number 4? What about future fast bowlers for South Africa that aren't injury prone? They're finding fast bowlers everywhere, so I'm not too worried about their fast bowling stock. Yeah, they're injury prone, but you go through periods where everyone gets injured and where they don't, right? Like you have to accept that. Australia had Pattinson and Cummins and couldn't keep them on the field, and it was like, maybe this will never work. Only one of them got right, and it very much worked. The issue with Markram being protected from the new ball, I actually think he should open. I actually think Markram thinks too much and just needs to go out there and face the ball and block the ones that are hard and smash the ones that he wants to smash. And I think that's easier to do opening than any other position. But if you protect him and move him down to number 4, you then have to find another opener. I'm just not sure that is that easy in this modern world. So I'd probably keep him there. Andy says, outside of the subcontinent, has there been an increase in interest in cricket over the last 5 years? Yes. Yeah, I think there has. I think there has pretty much globally been. I don't know if it's like a spike or anything, but I think there's definitely more interest in the last couple of years. Kiwi Nick says, if England win the toss, do they bat first? Also, how do you think the pitch will act? Finally, a New Zealand question on how high you would bat Phillips in tests. I wish they'd bat him up the order. I'd bat Phillips at 5. If England win the toss, do they bat? I'd have to go through the data on that one, Nick. There's 2 Gabba games I can think of in day-night, and one Australia failed to chase many, and the other one Pakistan went forever. I kind of think you want to bat first in that test, but I haven't looked at the information or anything, so that's off the top of my head. Oops. Andy says, is the decline in players coming through due to cricket no longer getting its biggest share of the best athletes in Australia, or is it just cyclical? Australia didn't get the best athletes in the 80s and 90s for cricket. So if you go back, the only cricketers who picked cricket over Aussie rules football in that period were the ones who failed at Aussie rules football. So Simon O'Donnell, Jamie Siddons, Shane Warne, Brad Hodge, all failed, right? Even up to Matthew Wade, his wasn't a failure, but he was another one. There weren't many people who picked cricket over football in that stage. And Aussie rules football is played, well, it's played all over the country, but it's certainly played very seriously everywhere except for New South Wales and Queensland. So that's a lot of players who could have played cricket at a very high level who didn't even make Shield cricket. Like by the late 80s, early 90s, they weren't even being able to play Rose. I think there's a guy called Craig Bradley who played for Carlton, who went on to be a football legend, who might have been one of the last guys that kind of played a little bit. And I can't imagine Craig Bradley even played much first class cricket. Let me just see what I can find here. Craig Bradley played 4 first class games, right? And never made any runs anyway. But I think everyone thought he was a pretty talented player. So actually, the opposite is what you're thinking is true. The one thing I would and also rugby maybe helps a little bit. I think having rugby league or rugby union as your as a major sport probably helps South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand in that their athletes are probably quite different. I can't think of any of the basketball guys playing a lot of cricket. I'm trying to think of Simmons or Giddy or Dyson Daniels. I think most of those guys played footy. I think some of them played cricket, but I don't remember any being age group cricketers unless I'm missing one. But the basketball guys are certainly not the case. So yeah, I mean, it should happen and it can happen, but they kind of already went through their darkest period, I would say. The darkest period was when Aussie rules becomes professional in the late 70s, and cricket really doesn't become fully professional until the late mid 90s at Shield level, because that's where it matters. And what you see from the 2000s onwards is guys like Alex Keith, Mitch Marsh, playing, picking cricket over football. Alex Carey picked football over cricket. Matthew Wade picked football over cricket. So the fact that we're starting to get players choose in both directions, whereas as I said before, like if Shane Warne could have played football, if Shane Warne would have been 2 or 3 inches taller with his hands and his brain, he probably would have been maybe 3 inches. He probably would have been a pretty good player in Aussie rules football, and maybe plays professionally. Maybe plays 50 to 100 games, and just doesn't pick cricket, right? Ricky Ponting's dad essentially told him, I think that story is, he told him to play bad in a football game because he didn't want him selected for like the Tasmanian regional team or something, right? Because he was like, you're going to play cricket. But he was such an outlier at such a young age. So no, I don't think that is exactly what's happened there. Ram says, can we see more of you and Ash on a regular basis? Love your previous episode. Would love to see you guys discuss other topics and educate the audience. Yeah, I think we'll do something else. I've asked him on the podcast. I don't really have, it's funny. I'm not sure exactly what topic I want to talk to him about, but I've asked him on the podcast, and he said, yeah, he'd be happy for that. And I'm sure, I'm hoping that he'll get me back on his again. But yeah, I think it's funny. It's one of those things that's probably just overdue, and I kind of kept thinking, yeah, we'll eventually make it happen, but we never quite did make it happen. And then it took him just reaching out, right? And, we don't know each other very well, right? Like there are some cricketers that I know, like if Dinesh Karthik walks past me and he will come over and say hello. I'm not sure if Ashwin and I would have had that relationship. But if we were together and talking, we would have, of course, had that relationship. So there are different players that you have different kinds of relationships with at different times in your career. And I probably not recording stuff, like not traveling as much, meant I wasn't at as many tours towards the end of his career. And at the start of your career, you're a bit nervous about just going up and chatting to people randomly when you see them. So I think later in my career, I would have just gone over and talked to him, or would have just ended up in a conversation with him. But I wasn't touring. I haven't really toured for the last 5-6 years, right? So it's very, very different. But yeah, like we obviously knew of each other, and we have chatted before for many different things, but not really at that level. But honestly, there are international players who've asked me on my podcast that I haven't even got around to getting on, right? Like there are probably other people that if I contacted them would love to be regular guests. I know there's a lot of guys who watch Kim Upper and like, yeah, we want to do something like that as well. It's just that there's so much going on for us at any one time. It's hard to do. But yeah, it was great to be on the show. I'll talk to Himanesh anytime. He was obviously on one of our shows recently as well. Man is an absolute legend. But yes, it was just great to be on with all of them. And yeah, thank you very much. I've gone over. I didn't realize there were that many super chats, and Paul Bayram's waiting for me. So I'll be back in a minute if you're just watching live on YouTube. And if not, the podcast I'm about to have with Bayram might actually come up before. We might be time traveling, is all I'm saying. Anyway, thank you very much to all the super chats, all the regular chats, and all the Patreon support as well. Please support us on Patreon or any way you can. Like, share, subscribe. If you're listening on the audio podcast, give us a review on your favorite app, and I will see you in moments. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. If you want to be part of the community that makes content like this, head over now.